I told him I wasn't attracted to him anymore while I was drunk. When I woke up, this happened. If I could turn back time and give myself a slap, I wouldn't think for a second. My name is Chloe. I am 30 years old. And the man sitting on the edge of our bed, looking at the carpet as though his heart had been ripped out of his chest. That's my husband, Daniel. He's 35. We've been together for 4 years. The first words he spoke that morning weren't yelled. They weren't angry. They were quiet, broken. Is that what you really think of me, Chloe? The sound of my own name felt like an accusation. My head was a throbbing, pulsing mess of regret and cheap Chardonnay. I couldn't remember leaving the bar. I couldn't remember the taxi ride home. And I certainly couldn't remember saying whatever it was that had shattered the man I married. But his eyes told me everything. It all started, or maybe it ended, last Friday night. Girls' night. That's what we called it. A sacred ritual. For my friends, it was a chance to vent about their husbands, their jobs, their perfect lives that weren't so perfect up close. For me, lately, it had just become a chance to drink. There was wine, beer, spirits, just about everything. And to be truthful, I was more than a little tipsy by the time I stumbled home. I was feeling high, both from the alcohol and from, I don't know, bitterness, insecurity, a toxic cocktail I'd been brewing for months. Daniel was waiting for me. He always did. He'd be on the sofa, a book resting on his chest, the TV on mute. He'd just want to make sure I got back safe. That was him. Dependable, solid. And what did I do? Instead of thanking him, instead of collapsing into his arms like a normal wife, I looked him straight in the eyes. And I said it. The words I couldn't remember, but whose ghost now haunted the space between us. The worst part? As I lay there in bed, my head splitting, I had to ask him, "What? What did I say, Daniel?" He finally looked up from the floor, and his gaze was so empty it scared me. "You said you weren't attracted to me anymore." He said it so simply. A statement of fact. And in that moment, our world fell apart. We met at a little cafe downtown called The Daily Grind. He was the manager. I still remember seeing him for the first time. He was standing behind the counter, wearing a plain button-up shirt, a smudge of chocolate on his cheek, and the kind of tired smile that told me he'd had a very long day. He wasn't my type. Not at all. My type was tall, fit, charming, the kind of man who walks into a room and sucks all the air out of it. The kind of man who looks good in pictures and even better in the dark. The kind of man who, as I'd recently learned, was also excellent at breaking your heart into 1,000 tiny pieces. Daniel was different, quiet, steady. Honestly, just a bit ordinary. I didn't pay much attention to him at first, but one day, I left my napkins behind. Instead of just handing them to me, he held them up and said, with a completely straight face, "Saving the planet, one napkin at a time? I'm impressed." It wasn't hilarious. It wasn't some witty line from a movie, but it was sweet. I laughed. A real laugh. At the time, I wasn't looking for a relationship. I was recovering. My friends were always teasing me about my terrible taste in men. My best friend, Sophia, had told me just a week before, "Chloe, maybe it's time to stop going for the sports cars and find a reliable sedan." I guess Daniel was the sedan. He invited me out a few weeks later. I remember hesitating before saying yes. I wasn't sure if there was a physical spark, but I told myself to stop being so shallow. I was done with men who were infatuated with my appearance but had no regard for me as a person. And Daniel? He cared. It was obvious from the start. We dated for about 1.5 years before he proposed. It wasn't anything grand. No flash mob, no fancy dinner. He just took me to our favorite park one afternoon, pulled out a simple ring, and said, "You're my best friend, Chloe. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" It wasn't a movie proposal, but it felt real. So I said yes. And for the first year, it was great. He was everything I thought I needed. He was kind, dependable, and always made time for me, even as his business grew. I'd never felt more safe, more loved. Yet somewhere along the way, the slide began. I can't pinpoint the exact moment. It wasn't one big thing. It was 1,000 little cracks, spreading silently beneath the surface. And that drunken Friday night, I had just taken a sledgehammer to the whole foundation. The days that followed were odd. Daniel didn't bring it up again. But a wall had gone up between us. A sheer, invisible wall of glass. I could see him, but I couldn't reach him. He started going to work earlier, coming home later. "We got a new shipment of beans," he'd say. Or, "The espresso machine is acting up." Excuses. Plausible, but they were still excuses. The little things vanished first. He stopped asking how my day was. He stopped telling me about the funny customer he'd had. The comfortable silence we used to share was now a heavy, suffocating quiet. Looking back, I know the poison had been seeping in for months. It started at brunch. Every Sunday, I'd meet my friends. Sophia was always the main event. "Oh my God, you guys," she'd say, flashing a new diamond bracelet. Richard surprised me with this, just because. Another friend, Jenna, would chime in. "Mark just booked us a surprise weekend getaway to that new spa resort upstate. He said I looked stressed." End quote. Then, they'd turn to me. "How are things with you and Daniel, Chloe?" What could I say? That he'd fixed the leaky faucet? That he'd remembered to pick up my favorite ice cream without me asking? These things felt so small, so domestic, so boring. "Things are great," I'd say, forcing a smile. But I could feel that sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. Don't get me wrong, Daniel was a good man, but in those moments, surrounded by stories of grand gestures and luxury, all I could think was how he didn't fit the picture-perfect image I craved. Then came the social media scroll. I'd lie in bed at night, the blue light of my phone illuminating my face. Couples at the gym, flexing their perfectly toned bodies. Couples on exotic vacations, kissing under waterfalls. Couples dressed in designer clothes, smiling at some exclusive event. Then I'd look at the few pictures I had with Daniel. He wasn't photogenic. He always looked a little stiff, a little awkward. His clothes never seemed to sit quite right. It wasn't fair, but I started wishing he looked different. Taller, fitter, more, something. Instead of appreciating him, I began to find petty, insignificant things to quarrel about. Little digs, disguised as jokes. If he wore a shirt that was a little too tight on his belly, I'd say, "Maybe that one's a standing-up shirt, honey." Ah. If he went back for a second helping at dinner, I'd chuckle. "Well, you're certainly making up for it tonight." I thought I was being clever. Now I see those little remarks for what they were. Tiny paper cuts. Each one small and insignificant on its own, but together, they could make a person bleed out. Of course, Daniel noticed the change. He wasn't oblivious. "Is everything okay with us?" he'd ask, his brow furrowed with genuine concern. "You've been kind of quiet lately." And I'd brush it off every time. "I'm just tired. Work's been stressful." The truth is, I didn't know how to explain what I was feeling because it didn't make sense, even to me. I loved him, or at least, I thought I did. But in my head, I was building this version of him that didn't exist. And every time the real Daniel fell short of that imaginary standard, I grew more and more frustrated. One day after brunch, Sophia pulled me aside. "Chloe, you're gorgeous. You're a senior designer at one of the best agencies in the city. You could have ended up with anyone." She lowered her voice. "Not to be rude, but don't you ever think you settled?" I laughed it off. But her words stuck with me. A poisonous seed planted in fertile ground. Did I settle? Was I trying too hard to convince myself that this quiet, dependable man was enough for me? The question echoed in my mind for weeks, twisting and turning, tainting every interaction. It became the soundtrack to our growing silence. Daniel's revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was silent, and it was devastating. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He didn't accuse. He just retreated. He built a fortress around himself, and I was left on the outside, knocking on a door he had no intention of opening. The physical distance grew. He'd fall asleep on the couch more often, claiming he didn't want to wake me when he came to bed late. We were living like roommates who shared a last name. One night, I tried to fix it, or what I thought was fixing it. I put on a dress he liked. I made his favorite dinner a terrible, slightly burned lasagna. I lit candles. I was playing the part of the devoted wife, hoping he would play his. He walked in, saw the setup, and a sad, tired look crossed his face. "This is nice, Chloe," he said, his voice flat. We ate in near silence. After dinner, I moved closer to him on the sofa, placing my hand on his leg. I tried to initiate something, anything to bridge the gap. He gently removed my hand. "I'm not in the mood," he said, not looking at me. "Maybe another time." It hurt. But I couldn't even blame him. I had started this. I had told him, in no uncertain terms, that I didn't find him desirable. How could I expect him to just forget that? My own mind started to turn on me. His patience, the quality I once admired, now felt like weakness. Why wasn't he fighting for me? Why wasn't he demanding answers? Why wasn't he showing any passion, even if it was anger? His calm, quiet withdrawal felt like the ultimate indifference. It felt like he was telling me, without words, that I wasn't even worth fighting for. That's the twisted logic of an unreliable narrator, isn't it? I was the one pushing him away, but in my mind, I blamed him for letting me go. I was trying to ruin the best thing that had ever happened to me, maybe because deep down, I didn't believe I deserved it. The more he clung to his quiet dignity, the more I yearned to escape, to find a reaction, to feel something other than the crushing weight of his silent disappointment. One night, he found me sitting in the dark, just staring at a blank TV screen. He didn't turn on the light. He just stood in the doorway. "Do you still love me?" he asked. His voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. I froze. The honest answer was, I didn't know. My feelings were a tangled mess of affection, resentment, guilt, and boredom. I wanted to say yes. I knew it was the right thing to say, the kind thing to say. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I deflected. "Of course I do. Why would you even ask that?" My tone was sharper than I intended. Defensive. He didn't push. He just nodded slowly, the silhouette in the doorway. "Okay," he said, but we both knew it wasn't okay. The look on his face, even in the shadows, told me he wasn't convinced, and in my twisted mind, I blamed him for that too. It was a Friday night, about a month after my drunken confession. The silence in our house had become a living thing. It was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. Daniel had barely spoken 2 sentences to me all week. Every word seemed to take a monumental effort. I knew I was the reason for all of it, but I didn't know how to fix it. So instead of staying home and facing the mess I'd created, I ran away. I told myself I just needed a breather, a night to clear my head. I texted Sophia, but she had plans with Richard. Figures. Everyone seemed to have their life together except me. So I went alone. I went to a sleek, downtown bar I'd never been to before. The kind of place with low lighting and expensive cocktails. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Just a drink or two, and then I'd go home. But once I got there, the loneliness hit me like a brick wall. All around me were couples laughing, groups of friends clinking glasses. It all made me feel so small, so invisible. I ordered a drink, then another. I was trying to drown out the guilt that wouldn't stop gnawing at me. That's when he showed up. He slid onto the bar stool next to me. "You look like you've had a long week," he said. He had this easy smile, the kind that makes you feel like you're the only person in the room. He wasn't overly handsome, but he carried himself with a confidence that was magnetic. I couldn't help but smile back. "You have no idea." His name was Leo. He was a consultant, or something equally vague and impressive. We started talking, and it was so effortless. He asked about my job. He laughed at my stupid jokes. He told me I had the prettiest smile he'd seen all night. It was such a stark, shocking contrast to the cold silence I'd been living with at home. For the first time in weeks, I felt seen. I felt wanted. I knew I shouldn't have been entertaining it. A voice in the back of my head was screaming at me, "You're a married woman. Go home." But I ignored it. I drowned it in another gin and tonic. The line between innocent conversation and something more began to blur. At one point, he leaned in closer, his voice a low murmur against the thrum of the music. "It's getting loud in here. Want to step outside for some air?" I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then I nodded. The cool night air hit me like a wake-up call, but it wasn't enough to stop what happened next. We stood by his car, a sleek, black convertible that was the exact opposite of Daniel's sensible sedan. He said something about how he couldn't believe someone like me was out alone. I don't even know what came over me. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was the desperation for any kind of validation. Maybe I just wanted to feel something, anything, other than the numb ache of my failing marriage. Before I knew it, I was leaning in, and so was he. And then we kissed. It wasn't a passionate, movie-worthy kiss. It was clumsy, fueled by gin and bad decisions. But in that moment, it felt like everything I'd been craving. Attention, a break from the weight of my guilt. It felt so wrong, but I didn't stop. The sound of a car pulling into the parking lot broke the spell. A pair of bright headlights washed over us, freezing us in a guilty tableau. I pulled away, laughing nervously, and turned to see who it was. And there he was. Daniel. He was sitting in his car, just watching us. My heart didn't just sink. It plummeted. It crashed through the floor of my stomach and shattered on the asphalt. He didn't get out. He didn't yell. He didn't do anything dramatic. He just sat there, behind the wheel, with this look on his face, a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. I will never forget the way he looked at me, like I was someone he didn't even recognize, a complete stranger who had just desecrated something sacred. Leo noticed my reaction and followed my gaze. "Do you know him?" he asked, his voice suddenly sober. I couldn't speak, I just nodded. "That's my husband." His face immediately dropped. "Oh, hell, I didn't know you were married. I swear, I wouldn't have." But I wasn't listening anymore. My entire focus was on Daniel. I started walking toward his car, my legs shaking. "Daniel, wait," I called out, my voice thin and pathetic. He didn't say a word. He just slowly, deliberately, rolled up the window. Then he put the car in reverse, backed out, and drove off, leaving me standing there in the middle of the parking lot like an idiot. Leo tried to apologize again, but I just waved him off. "Just go," I said, barely holding myself together. He didn't argue. He disappeared back into the bar, and I was alone. My heart was racing, my mind spinning with all the ways I had just irrevocably screwed up. I tried calling Daniel, but it went straight to voicemail, again and again. By the time I got home, his car wasn't in the driveway. The house was dark. That's when it hit me. I might have just destroyed the last shred of our marriage. And this time, I knew I couldn't fix it. I barely slept. I kept hoping to hear his key in the lock, hoping he'd come home, maybe yell at me, anything but this terrifying silence. He never did. When I walked into the kitchen the next morning, my hands trembling as I tried to make coffee, he was already there, sitting at the table, his arms crossed. He looked like he hadn't slept either, but his face was terrifyingly calm. That was his thing. He didn't explode. He just got quiet. And his quiet was so much worse. Before I could even say anything, he looked up at me. His eyes were cold. "We need to talk." His voice was steady, but the words felt like a punch to the gut. I sat down across from him, my whole body shaking. I tried to find the right words, to formulate an apology that could somehow undo the damage. But he started before I could. "You made it perfectly clear last night that you don't respect me," he said, his tone flat, controlled. "Or our marriage." "Ow?" He took a breath. "You've been pulling away for months, Chloe. I've been trying to ignore it, trying to be patient, hoping we could work through whatever was wrong. But what I saw last night..." He paused, his jaw tightening. That was the final straw. My throat closed up. "Daniel, it wasn't what it looked like. I swear. I didn't mean for any of that to happen." My voice cracked, and I could feel the hot tears starting to well up. I was so drunk, and... "Don't!" He cut me off, holding up a hand. The gesture was so final, it silenced me instantly. "Don't make excuses. You kissed another man. That was a choice you made, Chloe, drunk or not, and I can't come back from that." He paused, and his next words were quieter, but they cut even deeper. "It's not just about the kiss, is it? It's everything. It's the little comments about my clothes, my job. It's the way you look at me sometimes, like you're disappointed. It's the fact that a month ago, you told me you weren't even attracted to me anymore." He laid it all out, all the tiny cuts I had inflicted, now exposed as gaping wounds. I broke down. The weight of everything came crashing over me. "I'm so sorry," I sobbed, the words thick and useless. "I messed up. I know I did. But I love you, Daniel. Please, just let me make it right." He just shook his head slowly, and for the first time, I saw his eyes glisten, though he refused to let a single tear fall. "I don't think you do love me," he said, his voice raw with a pain he could no longer hide. "I think you loved the idea of me, the safety, but it wasn't enough for you." He stood up. "I gave you everything I had, Chloe, all of me, and it still wasn't enough. I don't even know who you are anymore." Those words, they hit harder than any slap could have. I wanted to argue, to plead with him, but I could see it in his face. He was done. This wasn't just anger or hurt. This was finality. He walked toward the door. I'll pack my things and move out by the end of the week, he said, his voice steady again. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the separation. Daniel, please, I begged, following him, grabbing his arm. Don't do this. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll change. Just tell me what to do. And he turned to look at me one last time. His expression was blank, empty. You can't fix this, Chloe, he said, gently removing my hand from his arm. You broke it, and I'm not staying to pick up the pieces. And then he was gone. The front door clicked shut behind him, the sound echoing through the silent, empty house. I collapsed onto the floor, the sound of my own sobbing the only thing left in the life we had built together. It's been 6 months since Daniel walked out of my life. Not a day goes by that I don't think about how badly I screwed things up. True to his word, he packed his things and was gone by the end of that week. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He didn't ask for anything except his clothes, his books, and a few personal items. The house felt cavernous without him. His lawyer reached out. The papers were clean, simple, and brutal in their efficiency. I signed them in a daze, barely able to process what was happening. It felt like the final nail in the coffin of a life I had murdered with my own hands. Now, I'm here, in a tiny studio apartment downtown, the kind with thin walls where you can hear your neighbors fighting. My parents helped me move in, but their faces were a mixture of pity and disappointment. My mom didn't sugarcoat it. Chloe, she said, looking around the depressing little room. You had everything most women dream of. A good, loving man who adored you, and you threw it all away. I don't even know who you are anymore. It hurt, but she wasn't wrong. My friends have distanced themselves. Even Sophia. She told me, awkwardly over coffee, that her husband Richard didn't think it was a good look for her to be hanging out with me. He called me a bad influence. That stung more than I expected. I've become the cautionary tale. The person people point to and say, don't end up like her. I've had a lot of time to think, to stare at the ceiling of this cramped apartment and replay every mistake. It wasn't just the cheating. It wasn't just the hurtful words. It was the slow, creeping rot of my own insecurity. I was so focused on what other people thought, on wanting a life that looked good on the outside, that I completely overlooked the beautiful, real thing I had on the inside. A few weeks ago, I ran into them, at the grocery store. I saw him first, in the produce aisle. He looked good, healthier. He'd lost a little weight, and he was standing up straighter. The tired slump in his shoulders was gone. And then I saw her. She was laughing at something he said. She was beautiful, but not in a flashy Instagram way. She had a warm, genuine smile. She touched his arm lightly as she laughed, and he looked at her with an expression I hadn't seen on his face in years. A look of pure, uncomplicated happiness. He looked free, like a massive weight had been lifted off his shoulders. And I realized that weight had been me. He's thriving. I heard he's opening a second location for his cafe. And from the way she looked at him, I could tell she treats him like he's the most incredible man in the world. Because he is. I hid behind a display of avocados until they were gone, my heart pounding in my chest. At first, I wanted to blame the circumstances, the pressure from my friends, even Daniel's lack of flash. But the truth is, I have no one to blame but myself. He was everything I could have ever asked for, but instead of appreciating that, I let my own self-doubt and vanity poison our relationship. I can't change the past, but I can own up to it. To Daniel, if you ever hear this, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need to say it. You deserved so much better than what I gave you, and I hope you've found that now. I hope she treats you the way I should have. And to anyone listening, thank you for hearing my story. If you have someone who loves you for who you are, don't take it for granted. Don't let your insecurities whisper poisonous lies in your ear. Don't go chasing after some unrealistic, filtered version of perfect. You might not get a second chance. Trust me, the grass isn't greener on the other side. It's just ashes, and you're left standing in them, all alone. That's it for me. Take care of the people you love. Bye for now.